Hey and welcome back. In the previous video we have learned how to create these RTC clients, but here we want to use this RTC client actually to create our RTC client and start the call. Now let's go to main view model, close other tabs. Here we want to have a function that knows how to set up this RTC client. So we write setup RTC connection. It's actually going to need a sender of type string and it will return the RTC clients. Now let's use run catching and destroy the previous RTC clients. So I don't have it yet. I'll move up here inside the variables, create private var RTC clients of type RTC clients. And it's going to be null initially. Let's go down again. We want to destroy this one. If it exists, press on destroy on it. Then let's make it null to make sure everything is okay. And then it's time to re-instantiate it. So use RTC clients, use WebRTC factory, create RTC clients. Now let's see. It asks us about the PeerConnection observer. So let's create a class just like my SDP observer and name it my peer observer. It's an open class ready to extend and it's going to extend from PeerConnection observer. Let's implement the members, remove them. We are doing this because we don't need all of these callbacks. So we just use like 3 of them here. I'll instantiate it anonymously because I want to only use 3 function. So my peer observer like this. Now for the listener, I'll also instantiate it anonymously. So using RTC clients implementation and the callback like this, but we have to implement the members because it's an abstract class, and then return these RTC clients. Before we forget, we want to use socket clients and send data to us that is generated from our RTC clients. And up here inside the create RTC client, I want to override some functions. The first one is on ICE candidate, which is calling back whenever there is an ICE candidate being generated. We will check if ICE candidate is not null. We simply want to use the RTC client and use on local ICE candidate generated. Give it to it. And for the target, we want to use the sender. Actually, this one has to be named targets like this to avoid confusion. The next function to be overridden is going to be on add stream. Let's check if the stream object is not null. Let's use run catching to avoid interruption or exceptions. We want to use remote surface, the bigger one inside the screen, and add this track inside it. But to have the access to this one, we want to store this remote surface view inside some variables inside our view model. Let's go up here, create a variable private var remote surface of type SurfaceViewRenderer, and it's going to be null initially. It says we should make sure that we don't want to have a memory leak here. So we know whenever our view model is destroyed, we for sure want to release this surface view, just like that. So now we are sure that whenever the view model is destroyed, now the surface is gone also. So right here, we will check if this surface view is not null. Let's actually rename it remote, something like this. Let's actually rename this to stream. So we want to check if a stream has the video tracks with index of 0. We want to add it inside the remote surface. Simple as that. Now that we know how to create the setup RTC connection, it's time to create the RTC connection whenever we need it. There are two parts to set up this RTC client. The first one, when we receive the accept call. It means that the user accepts the call. And the next one is when we create the offer as the caller and send it to the callee. Now let's take a look at the diagram and check where we are going to need to create these two PeerConnection on two devices. So whenever we receive the accept call here, it's actually time to create the RTC clients and create an offer and send it to the next connection or next client. And when this user receives the offer, it's time to create the RTC client, add the received offer as the remote description, and generate the answer and send it back to these clients. And here, this user will receive the answer and set it as a remote description. And we are good to go to set up the connection. And meanwhile, we have to exchange the ICE candidates. So let's go ahead and set up everything. As I said, the first part is inside the accept call function. Let's go and see what do we have here. Inside here, as you can see, we have this to do. Let's remove it. We simply want to use setup RTC connection, pass the target to it, use the offer, and simply pass the targets again, just like that. So the first part is ready. It will instantiate the RTC client and send an offer. So whenever we receive the offer here, we want to create the function handle offer and pass a message to it. Let's create its function. What we do here, we want to set the target to message.sender and then generate the session description from the data that is being sent, which is inside the data field of this signal message model. This offer is received from the caller to callee. So let's instantiate this one, session description. The type of it is going to be session description type.offer, and the value is going to be message data to string. Now it's time to set up the RTC connection. We know who the target is. It's the sender. We want to send it back to the sender of the callee. Now, after we created the RTC connection, it's time to first, you have to add the remote session, the one that we generated, and then we have to answer it back to the caller. So we use message.sender as the target, simple as that. So far we handled setting up the RTC client and sending and receiving offer and answer. Now it's time to handle the received answer. So let's use handle answer function, pass message to it. Let's now create this function. All we need to do is to create the session description again, just like the offer, but this time it's answer actually. And its data is going to be message.data to string. Now we just need to use the current RTC clients and use on remote session received and pass this session description to it. So far we know how to set up our RTC clients, create offer, send it to the callee, and inside the callee, create the RTC clients and set the received offer as a remote description, create the answer, and send it back to the caller. So we successfully exchanged the session descriptions. Now, what about the ICEs? As we saw inside the initialization of our RTC connection, whenever the ICE is generated, we use this function to first add it to our PeerConnection and transfer to the target or to other peer. So the local one is pretty much fine, but whenever we receive the ICE, we should be able to handle it. So handle ICE, let's pass message to it, create this function. I'll use run catching again, and I want to convert the ICE candidate back from the JSON. So I use from JSON. I don't have the JSON here. Let's use di to import JSON. Use message.data to string and give the ICE candidate class as the blueprint. So let's use RTC client and add on ICE candidate received and pass simply this ICE candidate to it. Now, one more thing to set up before we actually run the application, we need to go and set up this remote surface. It means we need to initialize this remote surface renderer and make it prepared to be able to show the remote screen or the remote video track. First, let's add it to current variable of the class. If you remember, we used this surface inside our onAdd stream and check if it's not null. Simply want to add the remote video track to it. So we have to store it inside our class. Also, we can make it null when the class is, when the view model is cleared. So we use the WebRTC factory and use init surface view to initialize our surface view. Simply pass remote renderer. But before we run our application, I made a mistake here. So we should here, whenever we receive the accept call, we should use message.sender as the target. Now let's run our application and check if everything is working fine. Let's copy this username here. Press call, accept it, and you can see the stream is on. It means that we successfully connected to the other peer and started the video call. That's it for this video. On the next video, we will summarize our course and implement the functionality of these keys. So till the next video, see you everyone.